Welcome in, listener. You're listening to a segment from the Slumpbuster podcast with Ju-Ju and Dre. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy.
The Irishman is back. Conor McGregor, with a fury of shoulder strikes, managed to get the big knockout win against Cowboy Cerrone in 40 seconds, which means you said you spent close to $70 on this pay-per-view?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It basically was $70. After tax, it came out to be about $70.
So $70 for 40 seconds of a fight. I don't have a calculator right next to me, but basically the return on investment isn't exactly ideal.
No, it's like I paid a full Kirk Cousins, basically.
You paid a full Kirk Cousins on that.
That is how much I spent on that pay-per-view, is basically buying a Kirk Cousins worth of talent.
But you got to give it to Conor. He looked good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was the perfect sort of comeback fight for him, right? And I was a little bit worried. You and I, we had talked, and I had chosen every other fight correctly except for this one, but this one just happened to be the perfect fight for Conor. He came back. He looked healthy. He looked focused. He looked athletic. He looked explosive. And this has by far been his best finish. I would even argue that it was a better finish than his Jose Aldo fight. You know, with the Jose Aldo fight, it sort of just came out, landed a good, I can't remember if it was a kick or a punch, but it was a good strike right on the button. Jose Aldo was out just right away, right? Didn't even get a chance to strike back. This one, he was just so dominant that Cowboy tried to strike back, and I think only landed one other good hit. And I think it was like one sort of semi-head kick that sort of got blocked. But this was the exact fight that Conor wanted coming back. Like, this is exactly how it had to go for him to be successful.
Yeah, it's like even hard to break down that fight because there wasn't enough of it to really break down. Okay, so like you talk about like Cowboy strategy. We mentioned, why are you trying to stand and bang with this guy? Like, it does not make sense from a stylistic standpoint. What we know about Conor, what we know about you, use your grappling, because that's going to be your main source of advantage in this fight, being able to wear him down, especially because you're the bigger guy coming into the fight. But no, I mean, you mentioned it in our pre-show, like really all he had was one attempted head kick, and that was really all she wrote. I mean, I keep going back to the shoulder strikes, man. Like, I've never seen that in a fight before. Do you think that's something he planned, or do you think he was just improvising on the spot?
No, I think some of it was just improvisation, right? And Conor really is, as much crap as I give him, right? I'm not the biggest Conor McGregor fan. I just don't like the way that he acts. But I got to give it to him when he strikes on his feet. He's a very creative striker. He mixes in a lot of different styles between boxing, kickboxing, capoeira even, right? So which is sort of a dancing martial arts from Brazil. And I think he just felt that, hey, his head is sort of lowered and I need to maximize my time, right? That I've already sort of got him dazed. And if I'm sitting here in a clinch where I'm not striking his head, that's every single second that passes, he's going to possibly be able to recover. So I need to keep doing something to keep him dazed, to keep at least jiggling his brain, you know, for a lack of a better term. You know, I got to do something to continue to jiggle that brain in there, right? Even while he's already dazed. And so I think Conor just sort of said, hey, I've got my shoulder. I'm a little bit loose on that side, even though I'm clinched enough that I can't pull like my wrist out completely to throw a good punch. I can use my shoulder to continually strike the jawline and to continue to keep Cowboy basically from being able to gather himself and be able to gather his thoughts. And it was just enough to continue to keep Cowboy dazed.
I mean, he broke his nose. He hit him with the hard part of the shoulder and broke his nose. I mean, it was one of the most creative, innovative things I've seen in a fight. And he earned this win. It was a must win for Conor because, again, I keep going back to, I thought if he loses, this is a retirement fight. Screw all the 5 fights he's talking about. This is over. You can't recover from a 3-fight losing streak, can you? But no, he said, enough of those questions. I'm going to win. I'm going to point at Jorge Masvidal, who's sitting ringside, and say, you're next.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Is that had Conor McGregor lost this fight, I think one, like, what fight do you make after that? Because Cowboy, really, as much respect as Cowboy has, you and I, we've sort of talked about it. He had been finished in what's now been 3 of his last 3 fights, but 2 of his last 2 fights going into this. So he's on a 2-fight losing streak, both finishes going into the McGregor fight. But had he, coming off of that 2-fight losing streak, been able to finish McGregor or been able to even beat McGregor, right? Even if he didn't finish him, even if it was a decision, like, had he been able to do that, I think the sort of mystique of Conor McGregor and sort of this name brand that Conor McGregor has built up, I think a lot of people would have said, hey, you know, what really is that brand? It's a guy that never defended a title, went on a 3-fight losing streak, came back, and then got beat by a gatekeeper that had been finished the 2 times right before him. And so I think Conor would have lost a lot of fans. The UFC would have lost a lot of their reputation, right, in backing Conor McGregor as their sort of face of the franchise. And like, hey, this dude can't even fight. He can't even keep up with one of the old guys that has 50 fights in the UFC, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was an important thing for not just Conor, but for the UFC business as a whole, because now the options are endless. You have Conor, who's a guy who's unique because you can put him in 3 different weight classes, and you look at potential fights. First off, Aundre, which one do you want? Because we're talking about Gaethje, we're talking about Mazvidal, we're talking about Usman, Covington. I mean, I just want to see that presser between him and Covington if that fight ever came to be. Then let's see here. What else do we got? We have Khabib II, Diaz III. 2 boxing matches potentially between Mayweather again and, you know, Pacquiao, but I'm going to focus on the UFC side. I'm going to focus in the octagon. What do you personally want to see, Aundre, and what will happen?
Okay, so here's my guess. I know Dana White has come out and said, oh, you know, the Khabib rematch is definitely happening. The Khabib rematch is happening. I do not think that that's a wise way to go, because at the end of the day, I still think that Conor McGregor's main weakness is going to be exactly what we've said that it is, and it's going to be on the ground, right? And Khabib is just too good of a wrestler that Khabib took the risk and sort of stood with Conor last time and was able to knock Conor down even. But I think this time, seeing how big and strong McGregor is, I think Khabib is just going to say, nope, I'm just going to take him to the ground right away and just whoop him, right? So I don't think the Khabib fight is the way to go. What I do think would be the better way to go, and as much as maybe not a moneymaker as this fight would be, right? So I think McGregor would make a lot of money possibly fighting an Usman or a Covington. He'd make a lot of money fighting a Street Jesus, Jorge Masvidal. This fight wouldn't make as much money, but I think it would make a lot of sense for Conor and would get him probably a good win, is Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje is a good wrestler, but he doesn't use his wrestling when he fights. He sort of just stands up and bangs. And Gaethje's taken a lot of hits in the past. He's even been knocked out, I think, in the UFC as of recently, or TKO'd, I should say. And so I think Gaethje would be one of those fighters that has enough pride, or is so prideful in a sense, that he would be willing to stand with McGregor. But McGregor now would look like he's the bigger guy and might be able to knock Gaethje out and still keep his fans, still get a really impressive win, and be able to say, like, hey, look, I just picked off another one of the top dudes at lightweight.
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing is, you know, Dana definitely wants to put Conor back into the main event picture, put him back with a title shot potentially. But it's which title do you send him after?
Yeah, I definitely would say I'd rather him fight the winner of Khabib versus Ferguson if I'm trying to shoehorn him into a title shot. And my main reasoning being, if Ferguson wins, Ferguson is a little bit older. Ferguson does not quite have the wrestling takedowns, and it would still be a really good fight. So Ferguson is a good wrestler, without a doubt. He's very good on the ground, and I still think he's a very dangerous matchup for Conor, but it's slightly easier matchup than Khabib is. Then when it comes to Usman and Covington, those two dudes are all-American wrestlers in college, right? I don't know if Covington was, but he was still a D1 wrestler. Usman was an all-American in D2 wrestling. And so those two guys, I would not want Conor fighting either of those two. Like, you know that is Conor's Achilles heel, is fighting wrestlers. Those two guys would easily be able to take him down, and I don't think that he could get away. And they're the bigger, stronger fighters. As big and as strong as McGregor looked, we still don't know what his gas tank is. We know that Covington and we know that Usman can go 5 rounds. We saw it in their last fight, right? And it happened to be ended just because Covington's jaw was broken, and we know that he was hurt. But it probably would have gone all the way to decision had that not been the case. I don't think that Conor McGregor can yet go that far. I don't think he can go a full 5-round fight with some of those monsters at 170.
He's definitely attributing his now sober lifestyle for a better cardio, better endurance. He was prepared for this fight with Cowboy to go a few rounds. It just, you know, at the end of the day, his talent just shined through and he was able to pick up a big win. And we did question, I mean, Cowboy, like you mentioned, he's been finishing his last couple fights. I think the more and more a fighter gets knocked out, it just becomes time and it becomes easier to knock them out. I think Cowboy's at that point. I don't know what his next fight is, but I wouldn't be surprised if you told me he went down again in an early round, just given what we're seeing if he has to face another talented striker like McGregor. Going back to Conor, though, just from a marketing standpoint, the fights with, like I mentioned, Masvidal, that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
That's the hottest fight right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know Conor wants that Khabib rematch, but another facet to that is he would have to go down to Khabib. Khabib's not going to go up for him. Khabib doesn't want to do anything for him. Khabib wanted to kill him the last time those two were in an octagon.
And he almost did.
So he's not going to give any breaks or any kind of meet in the middle moments for Conor if those two line up again. I mean, it would be an exciting fight from the standpoint of being able to hype up the fact there was a brawl in the stands the last time those two went toe to toe. But I don't need to see that fight right now. I need to see him versus Masvidal because it's something new. It's something exciting. Yeah. I don't know if they're going to bring back the BMF title, but I would rather have a 5-round gritty BMF fight that's not a real title, but his kind of a title. Then, obviously the introduction to that bout was Nate Diaz losing in an early round, which no one wanted to see because of that stoppage.
Yeah. And part of the issue with that, so I definitely agree that Masvidal is the fight to make. I think that's the one everybody wants to see, right? But we saw that Diaz sort of got handled by Masvidal, and that makes me a little bit worried for McGregor taking on this fight. And I know that styles make, matchups, right? And so even though Masvidal was able to own Diaz, right, and Diaz was able to beat McGregor, it does not necessarily mean that Masvidal is going to be able to own McGregor. That being said, I still think Masvidal is probably the slightly better fighter, also probably the slightly bigger of the fighters. So I would just be really intrigued. You're right. That's the number one fight that I want to see. So as much as I said Gaethje is the wise move for McGregor probably to make, right, I think that would be an easier win. I think the Masvidal fight brings in the most money for the UFC. You can make it for that BMF title, and it's just going to be one heck of a fight. And it's going to be all stand-up. You don't have to really worry about, is Masvidal going to take him down to the ground like Khabib and just hold him on the ground for 3 rounds or 5 rounds even. It's going to be like, hey, somebody's going to basically walk out of the cage with a broken nose, a broken jaw, and somebody's going to be knocked out basically at the end of the fight.
I wonder how the build-up to that fight would go because the big story of the press conference, the lead-up to the Cerrone fight was Conor being respectful, him being nice, him hugging Cowboy's grandma in the middle of the octagon. But now it's like, I got that W. I got that win under my belt, and I'm fighting a guy who's been talking a lot of trash over the last year. You think old Conor comes out to play?
Oh, absolutely. And I think Dana White would definitely encourage it. The most, I think, trash talk and the best build-up to a fight would either be Jorge Masvidal, because Masvidal will say whatever the heck he wants to say. Like, he's from the hood and he's one of the baddest dudes on the face of the planet. So he'll say whatever he wants. We know that Conor will say whatever he wants. And then Colby Covington. Colby Covington is also a master at just making up stupid crap and saying it, and he's not afraid to say whatever he wants. So those two fights I think are the most marketable just from a pure marketing campaign, right? Like, it writes itself. I'm excited. As much as I dislike Conor McGregor, the UFC is better when Conor McGregor is good and not just getting torched by a Khabib, right, or a Nate Diaz. Like, it is better for the UFC when he is good. Just like the NBA is better when it's the Celtics and the Lakers are good. Just like the NFL is better when the Patriots are good. Like, it just gets people watching. As much as we hate those franchises, as much as, we hate some of these fighters, everybody will watch a Conor McGregor fight, especially if it's against a Jorge Masvidal or a Colby Covington, against these big names.